First contact through food. Dr. Sarah Chen never expected her PhD in botanical chemistry to make her humanity's first point of contact with an alien species. Yet here she was, standing in her research greenhouse at the International Space Station's Botanical Lab, watching as the towering alien dignitary before her experienced what appeared to be an intense emotional reaction to ordinary basil. The being, who had introduced themselves as Ambassador Zixtal of the Vraxi Confederation, pressed their sensory appendages against the aromatic leaves. Their iridescent scales shifted from a deep blue to a brilliant gold, a change that their cultural liaison had explained indicated extreme pleasure or excitement. Dr. Chen, the ambassador's translator device, produced perfectly accented English. These molecules, they sing to our neural pathways in ways I cannot fully express. What do you call this miracle plant? Sarah smiled, trying to maintain her professional composure despite the historical significance of the moment. That's just sweet basil, Ambassador. Ocimum basilicum. It's been used in human cooking for thousands of years. The ambassador's auxiliary breathing vents fluttered, their equivalent of a gasp. Mere cooking. You use this neural harmonizer for sustenance. Well, for flavor mainly, Sarah explained, reaching out to pluck a leaf. She crushed it between her fingers, releasing more of the aromatic compounds. The ambassador's color shifted even more intensely. It's a common herb in many Earth cuisines. Would you like to see our other culinary plants? The next 3 hours were a blur of excitement as Sarah guided the ambassador through her research greenhouse. Each new herb and spice seemed to provoke an even more intense reaction. Thyme caused their scales to ripple in patterns Sarah's xenobiologists' colleagues would later spend weeks analyzing. Oregano induced what appeared to be a meditative state. But it was when they reached the mint section that everything changed. The ambassador's translator fell silent for a full minute as they processed the plant's scent. When they finally spoke, their voice trembled with emotion. Dr. Chen, your species has achieved something our greatest scientists have sought for millennia. These compounds, they mirror exactly the molecular structures we theorized could stabilize our neural pathways during deep space travel. We've never been able to synthesize them successfully, yet here you grow them, for pleasure. Sarah's mind raced with the implications. The Vraxi were notorious for their sensitivity to deep space travel, a limitation that had severely hampered their expansion despite their advanced technology. If Earth's common herbs could solve this problem. Ambassador, she said carefully, I believe we have an opportunity here for both our species. Would you be interested in establishing a formal botanical exchange program? The ambassador's scales shifted to a deep purple. What Sarah would later learn indicated profound respect and gratitude. Dr. Chen, I believe we have an opportunity for much more than that. Your species has mastered biological engineering on a level we barely comprehend, creating these compounds through natural means while we struggled with artificial synthesis. We have much to learn from each other. Sarah nodded, already thinking about the possibilities. We'll need to establish proper research protocols, of course. And there will need to be careful testing to ensure there are no adverse reactions. The ambassador raised a primary appendage in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of enthusiasm. Of course. But Dr. Chen, you must understand. This discovery will revolutionize our entire approach to space travel. The Vraxi Confederation would be very interested in establishing a comprehensive trade agreement centered around your botanical expertise. As Sarah led the ambassador back to the main conference room, where anxious diplomats from both species waited, she couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Humanity's first major interstellar trade agreement might well be based on herbs and spices, just as so many of humanity's early terrestrial trade routes had been. Later that night, as she recorded her logs, Sarah reflected on the day's events. The Vraxi had technologies that humanity had only dreamed of, yet something as simple as basil and mint had completely transformed their diplomatic relationship. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound connections could come from the simplest things. She added a final note to her log. Request immediate expansion of hydroponics facilities. Recommend focus on aromatic herbs, particularly basil, mint, and thyme families. Priority status: critical. Potential applications: interstellar diplomacy and xenomedicine. Additional note: never underestimate the power of a good herb garden. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah could see the lights of the new Vraxi ships arriving in Earth orbit through her viewport. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence, shifting colors and patterns that reminded her of the ambassador's scales. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of formally documenting the Vraxi reactions to each herb and spice in her collection. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply marvel at how the universe could still surprise her. In the greenhouse below, the basil plants continued their slow, steady growth, unaware that they had just helped forge humanity's first interstellar alliance. The spice must flow. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood at the helm of the U.S. Botanical, Earth's first dedicated agricultural transport ship, watching as another Vraxi medical transport dropped out of FTL near their position. It was the third one this week, and they all carried the same urgent message: need more mint. The mint crisis, as Earth's media had dubbed it, had begun 3 months after the initial discovery of Earth herbs' effects on Vraxi physiology. What started as a diplomatic curiosity had quickly evolved into a medical necessity when researchers discovered that peppermint compounds could prevent the neural degradation that plagued Vraxi during extended space travel. Captain, her XO, Lieutenant James Chen, no relation to the now famous Dr. Sarah Chen, called from his station. The Vraxi ship is requesting immediate transfer of their allocated supply. They're claiming medical emergency priority. Maya rubbed her temples. How many medical emergencies does this make this month? 17, Captain. All authorized by the Vraxi Medical Consortium. The problem wasn't Earth's ability to grow the plants. Automated hydroponics facilities were being built at an unprecedented rate. The problem was distribution. Every Vraxi ship now required a steady supply of mint-derived compounds for their neural stabilizers. The demand had grown exponentially, and with it, political tensions. "Ma'am," the communications officer interrupted. "Incoming priority message from Earth Command." The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Hassan's grave face. "Captain Rodriguez, we have a situation. The Vraxi Central Council is demanding we increase production by 300% within the next solar month. They're claiming we're artificially limiting supply to drive up prices." Maya felt her jaw tighten. "That's impossible. We're already operating at maximum capacity. Every available hydroponics bay from Earth to Mars is dedicated to herb production." "I know that, and you know that," Hassan replied. "But the Vraxi are convinced we're holding out on them. Their deep space exploration fleet is grounded without these supplies. They're getting desperate." An alert chimed on Maya's console. Another Vraxi ship dropping out of FTL. This one was larger, diplomatic class. "Admiral," Maya said, "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." "At this point, Captain, I'm open to anything." Maya pulled up the ship's botanical database on her display. "We've been thinking about this all wrong. We're trying to solve a Vraxi problem with human infrastructure. What if instead, we taught them to solve it themselves?" Hassan's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting we share our agricultural technology. More than that, we share our agricultural knowledge. The Vraxi have incredible synthetic manufacturing capabilities, but they've never developed Earth-style agriculture. They don't understand the concept of cultivating living things for resources." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. "The agricultural lobbies will fight this. They're making a fortune on the current arrangement. And they'll make even more as consultants and teachers," Maya countered. "Besides, we're one supply chain disruption away from a diplomatic crisis. The Vraxi need these compounds to function in space. If we can't meet their needs, they'll find another way to get them, one we might not like." Before Hassan could respond, Lieutenant Chen called out, "Captain, the diplomatic vessel is hailing us." Maya straightened her uniform. Put them through. The holographic display split, showing both Admiral Hassan and Ambassador Zixtal. The ambassador's scales were a mottled gray, a sign of distress Maya had learned to recognize. Captain Rodriguez, the ambassador's translator, rendered their complex harmonics into English. I come with grave news. Our medical facilities are reporting the first cases of neural cascade failure in over a century. Without increased supplies of your stabilizing compounds, we face a healthcare crisis. Maya took a deep breath. Ambassador, with respect, I'd like to offer an alternative solution, one that could help both our species. The ambassador's scales shifted slightly, showing interest. Proceed. Instead of just selling you our herbs, we teach you to grow them yourselves. Full technological and botanical knowledge transfer. We help you set up your own hydroponics facilities, train your people in earth agricultural techniques. The ambassador's scales rippled with rapid color changes. Surprise, consideration, hope. You would share such knowledge. With appropriate agreements in place, yes. We've seen how these compounds affect your people. This isn't just about trade anymore. It's about your species' ability to explore space safely. We want to help. Admiral Hassan nodded slowly. We would need guarantees about the technology's use, of course, and fair compensation for our agricultural expertise. And we would require assurances about supply continuity during the transition. The ambassador added, their scales settling into a more neutral blue. Maya smiled. I think we can work something out. After all, humanity's history is full of examples of how sharing agricultural knowledge benefits everyone involved. The negotiations that followed would last weeks, but that moment marked a turning point in human-Vraxi relations. The crisis had revealed a fundamental truth. True cooperation meant sharing knowledge, not just resources. As Maya watched the diplomatic vessel dock with the botanical, she couldn't help but think about how far they'd come since that first meeting in Dr. Chen's greenhouse. Humanity had found its place in the galactic community not through superior weapons or faster ships, but through something as simple as teaching others how to grow plants. Her console chimed again, more Vraxi ships arriving. But this time, they weren't coming for emergency supplies. They were coming to learn. Gardens in space. The Gemini Agricultural Station was a marvel of human-Vraxi cooperation, a massive rotating ring structure whose circumference housed the largest hydroponic gardens ever constructed. Through its crystalline exterior walls, one could see endless rows of green stretching into the curve of the horizon, illuminated by carefully calibrated artificial sunlight. Dr. Aisha Patel stood at the central observation deck, watching as human and Vraxi botanists moved between the growing sections. Even after 6 months as the station's lead botanical engineer, the sight still filled her with wonder. Dr. Patel, a harmonic voice called from behind her. The latest growth metrics from Section 7 are concerning. She turned to face her Vraxi deputy, Senior Cultivator Nixville. Their scales showed traces of worry purple among their usual professional blue. The Vraxi had taken to Earth's agricultural sciences with remarkable enthusiasm, but they sometimes struggled with the organic unpredictability of living plants. Show me, Aisha said, pulling up the holographic display. The numbers were indeed troubling. The new mint hybrid they'd developed specifically for Vraxi neural chemistry was showing signs of genetic instability. The plants were dying faster than they could mature. Could it be sabotage? Nixville's translator rendered the question in a whisper. Aisha frowned. They'd all heard the rumors. A faction of traditionalist Vraxi who opposed their species' growing dependence on earth plants, and hardline human corporations who'd lost their monopoly on the herb trade. But actual sabotage seemed extreme. Let's not jump to conclusions, she said. We should. The station's alert system cut her off, blaring a warning she'd never heard before. Red emergency lights began pulsing throughout the observation deck. Containment breach in Section 7, the AI announced. Biological contamination detected. Emergency protocols initiated. Aisha's blood ran cold. Section 7 was where they kept their most sensitive experimental breeds. Computer, show me Section 7 surveillance. The holographic display shifted, showing the massive greenhouse chamber. At first, everything looked normal, until she noticed the pattern of plant death spreading like a wave across the growing beds. Some kind of engineered pathogen. Nixful said, their scales shifting to alarm red. It's targeting the neural active compound specifically. Aisha was already moving. Lockdown Section 7. Full quarantine protocols. She activated her comm link. All personnel, this is Dr. Patel. We had a level 1 botanical emergency. This is not a drill. The next hours were a blur of activity. As emergency teams in biosuits worked to contain the spread, Aisha and her team raced to identify the pathogen. What they found was chilling. A sophisticated bioweapon designed to destroy not just the plants, but to render the soil itself unable to support future growth. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Aisha told the emergency council that had convened in the station's Secure Command Center. This wasn't just about destroying our current crop. They wanted to make sure we couldn't grow more. Station Commander Sarah Chen, who had requested this posting after her historic first contact, nodded grimly. Do we have any way to counter it? Nick's full scales rippled with what Aisha had learned to recognize as inspiration. Perhaps we're thinking about this the wrong way. We've been trying to fight this pathogen with traditional containment methods. But what if we could use Earth's biological diversity against it? Aisha caught on immediately. Companion planting. It's an ancient Earth agricultural technique. Some plants naturally protect others from disease and pests. We could. She rushed to her console, pulling up the station's botanical database. Look, we've been so focused on the mint family, we forgot about Earth's natural plant defenders. Marigolds, neem, garlic, they all produce natural antifungal and antibacterial compounds. Could it work? Commander Chen asked. In theory, Aisha said. We'd need to modify the plants to work in our hydroponic systems, but the basic chemistry is sound. Nature has been fighting biological warfare for billions of years. We just need to let it do what it does best. The next weeks were a testament to human-Vraxi cooperation. While security teams investigated the sabotage, botanical teams worked around the clock to develop a new growing system that integrated protective companion plants with their vital herb crops. The Vraxi's advanced genetic analysis tools combined with Earth's ancient agricultural wisdom created something entirely new. 2 months later, Aisha stood in the newly replanted Section 7. Rows of mint grew strong and healthy, protected by rings of marigolds and other guardian plants. The air was thick with the mingled scents of herbs and flowers. Beautiful, isn't it? Nixful said, their scales showing the deep gold of contentment. Our ancestors would never have thought to let plants protect other plants. We always sought to control every variable. Aisha smiled. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones nature figured out long ago. We just have to be humble enough to learn from them. The saboteurs had meant to drive a wedge between humans and Vraxi, to show that their cooperation was fragile. Instead, they had forced both species to work even more closely together, creating growing systems more resilient than either could have developed alone. As she watched a team of human and Vraxi botanists planting a new row of protective flowers, Aisha realized that they had grown something even more valuable than herbs: trust. And like the plants they tended, that trust would only grow stronger with proper care and attention. The root of war. The emergency briefing room aboard the Gemini Agricultural Station hummed with tension. Admiral Hassan's hologram dominated the center of the room, his expression grave as he addressed the assembled human and Vraxi leaders. 3 hours ago, the militant faction calling themselves Pure Path seized control of the Vraxi colony on Proxima B. They're demanding we cease all botanical trade and destroy Earth's agricultural database. They claim our herbs have made their species weak and dependent. Commander Sarah Chen watched the Vraxi Council members' scales shift through patterns of distress. Their species had come to rely on Earth's herbs not just for space travel, but for a range of medical treatments. Cutting off the supply would be catastrophic. There's more, the Admiral continued. They've taken hostages, both human and Vraxi botanical researchers, and they've threatened to release a modified version of the pathogen that attacked the station. This version doesn't just target plants, it's designed to render entire planets permanently infertile. The room erupted in alarmed discussions. Dr. Aisha Patel, who had been quietly analyzing data on her tablet, suddenly stood up. "Admiral, I think I know what they're really after," she said. "The Pure Path didn't just take the colony. They took our newest seed vault, the one containing all our experimental hybrids." Senior cultivator Nixful's scales flashed with realization. The enhanced strains, the ones we modify to grow in extreme conditions. Aisha nodded. "They don't want to destroy our agricultural knowledge. They want to steal it, control it. With those seeds, they could hold both our species hostage." Commander Chen leaned forward. "Then we need to stop them before they can move those seeds off-world. But a military solution risks destroying exactly what we're trying to protect." "Perhaps," Nixful said, their scales shifting to a thoughtful blue, "we could use their own tactics against them. Not with weapons, but with plants." All eyes turned to the Vraxi scientist. They pulled up a holographic display of Earth's rainforest canopy. "Humans have something we never developed, an understanding of ecological warfare. Your plants don't just grow. They compete. They defend. They communicate." Dr. Patel's eyes widened. The mycorrhizal networks. The wood wide web. She turned to the Admiral. "Sir, we might have a way to retake the colony without destroying it. But we'll need every scrap of biotechnology both our species can muster, and we'll have to work fast." The plan they developed over the next hours was unlike anything in military history. While Pure Path fortified their defenses against traditional attacks, human and Vraxi scientists worked to create something entirely new. They called it Operation Seedfall. 48 hours later, Commander Chen watched from the bridge of the U.S. Botanical as thousands of tiny pods rained down on Proxima B's surface. To Pure Path's sensors, they looked like ordinary debris from the planet's rings. In reality, each pod contained a carefully engineered package of Earth's most aggressive, but ultimately harmless, botanical life. Within hours, the colony's external sensors began to fail as fast-growing vines covered them in thick layers of vegetation. Modified fungi established underground networks that disrupted their communication systems. Pollen-like particles carrying mild sedatives drifted through their air filters. "They're trying to burn the plants away," Aisha reported, watching the feed. "But these strains are fire-adapted. Every time they burn them, they release spores that grow twice as fast." The Pure Path forces found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't shoot, couldn't bomb, and couldn't negotiate with. The plants weren't attacking them. They were simply growing, spreading, and doing what plants had evolved to do over millions of years on Earth: survive and thrive. 24 hours after Operation Seedfall began, Pure Path surrendered. Their forces emerged from the colony complex, stumbling through chest-high meadows that hadn't existed 2 days before. The hostages were recovered safely, along with the stolen seed vault. In the aftermath, as joint human-Vraxi teams worked to restore the colony, Commander Chen found Dr. Patel in one of the newly grown gardens. "You know," Aisha said, examining a flower that hadn't existed before their genetic work, "Pure Path was right about one thing. Our species are dependent on each other now, but they were wrong about that being a weakness." She gestured to where human and Vraxi scientists were working together to catalog the new hybrid species their emergency engineering had created. "Look at what we can achieve together. We didn't just save the colony. We've created whole new forms of life that could help terraform other worlds." Commander Chen smiled, remembering that first meeting in her greenhouse years ago. "That's the thing about plants, isn't it? Give them the right conditions, and they don't just survive. They create something new, something better." "Just like us," Aisha agreed, watching as a Vraxi child carefully helped a human botanist plant a new row of seedlings. The child's scales shimmered with colors of joy and wonder, emotions that needed no translator to understand. The pure path had tried to force their species apart. Instead, they had brought them closer together, creating new bonds as intricate and unbreakable as the root networks spreading beneath their feet. Blooming peace. 10 years after the Pure Path incident, the Gemini Agricultural Station had grown into something its founders could never have imagined. The original ring had sprouted additional segments like petals on a flower, each one housing new experiments in human Vraxi botanical science. Dr. Aisha Patel, now Director of Interspecies Agricultural Development, stood in the station's newest addition, the Harmony Garden. Unlike the strictly controlled research sections, this vast chamber was deliberately wild, a place where earth plants and their Vraxi counterparts grew together in carefully organized chaos. Remarkable, isn't it? Ambassador Zixtel said, their scales shimmering with the deep gold of contentment. When I first smelled your basil plants all those years ago, I never imagined it would lead to this. Aisha watched as a group of human and Vraxi children moved through the garden, part of the station's new educational exchange program. The Vraxi Yum 1 scales flickered with excitement as they learned to plant earth seedlings, while human children carefully handled exotic Vraxi flora that pulsed with bioluminescence. The children don't even remember when our species were strangers to each other, she observed. To them, this is just how things are. As it should be, the ambassador agreed. Though I must admit, some of our traditionalists are still struggling with the changes. Just yesterday, I heard complaints about the new hybrid ceremonies. Hesha smiled, knowing what they meant. Young Vraxi had begun incorporating earth flowers into their age-old molting ceremonies, while human couples increasingly chose to include Vraxi light plants in their wedding celebrations. Culture, like life itself, found ways to adapt and grow. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the station's research division. Director Patel, Ambassador, you need to see this immediately. In the primary research lab, senior cultivator Nixville was practically vibrating with excitement, their scales a kaleidoscope of joy colors. On the main display was a microscopic image of something extraordinary, plant cells unlike anything either species had seen before. It happened naturally, Nixville explained. In the Harmony Garden, earth plants and Vraxi flora, they've begun to hybridize on their own. The cellular structures have merged in ways our genetic engineering never achieved. Aisha studied the images in amazement. The hybrid plants had somehow combined the neural stabilizing properties of earth herds with the bioluminescent energy efficiency of Vraxi flora. It was evolution in action, life finding new ways to thrive in the environment they'd created. Life finds a way, she quoted softly, remembering an old Earth movie. Even across the stars. The discovery would prove to be just the beginning. Over the next few years, the naturally occurring hybrids revolutionized both species' approach to space travel and colonization. The new plants could grow in environments neither Earth nor Vraxi species could survive alone, paving the way for joint colonization efforts that would have been impossible before. But perhaps more importantly, the hybrid plants became a symbol of something greater, proof that differences could become strengths when given the chance to grow together. 5 years later, Aisha stood in a very different garden. This one was on Earth, in the heart of the new Interstellar Botanical Institute. Before her was a gathering of representatives from a dozen newly contacted alien species, all drawn by the success of the Human Vraxi Botanical Partnership. The universe is vast, she told them, and life takes countless forms. But everywhere we look, we find the same truth. Life grows stronger through diversity, through cooperation, through the sharing of strengths. We learned this lesson in our gardens, watching different species support and protect each other. Now we offer to share that knowledge with all of you. As she spoke, the hybrid plants around them pulsed with soft light, earth and Vraxi biology, working in harmony to create something beautiful and new. In their glow, She could see the wonder on alien faces, the same wonder she had felt when she first witnessed the power of plants to bring species together. Commander Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, watched from the back of the gathering. She thought back to that first meeting in her greenhouse, when a simple basil plant had opened the door to the stars. They had come so far since then, yet in many ways, they were still growing, still learning, still reaching toward the light together. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to the galactic community wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their understanding of how to grow things, how to nurture life, and how to help different species thrive together. They had become the gardeners of the galaxy, and the garden they tended was blooming with possibilities. As the sun set on Earth, countless stars became visible in the darkening sky. Around each of those stars, new gardens were growing, new connections were being made, and new forms of life were learning to flourish together. The future, like a well-tended garden, was full of promise and potential, waiting to be cultivated by those willing to nurture it. And somewhere, in a simple greenhouse that started it all, a basil plant still grew, its leaves reaching toward the stars.